Right, well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on the time you're actually watching this. But if it's live Sunday morning, it's September 14th, 2025. We're glad to have you here. We're going to wait just a few minutes to let some people log on, but I just want to let everybody know that I had asked Ruth, my wife, to join me this morning because Andy is not able to be with us. I'm just pulling up where I can read your comments if you have any. Andy's not able to be with us this morning. We knew we were supposed to be getting into Hebrews, finishing up Hebrews chapter 12 this week, but we're going to put that on pause, and we're going to do a special class dealing with finding Jesus through tragedy. We just celebrated, or not celebrated, that's the wrong word, but we just commemorated the 24th anniversary of the September 11th, 2001 attack on New York City and Washington, D.C., and Shanksville, Pennsylvania as well. Wanted to kind of reflect on that and talk about the ability to find Jesus through the face of tragedy. And like I said, I'd asked Ruth to join me this morning since Andy's not able to be here. And Miss Strickland, our neighbor, has moved into a hospice. I'm sorry, Lord forbid that. She's in a assisted living. And she had asked her to go pick her up to join us at church this morning. So Ruth's doing that, and I'd rather her do that so that Linda Strickland was able to join us this morning. So I'm unfortunately not able to have her to keep me pointed in the right direction and keep my words from getting turned around like they always do. But I'm glad she's able to go pick up Miss Strickland and bring her to church this morning. We're glad to have you this morning, and I know that a lot of the people that watch the online Sunday school are unable to physically be at church, and you would prefer to do that. I understand that, but if you do have the ability to be at church this morning, we would love to have you here at 11 o'clock at Yellow Creek Baptist Church if you're watching this live. Now, what last week we were talking in Hebrews chapter 12 about the references to Matthew chapter 7, and I still want you to do your homework. If you still haven't read Matthew chapter 7, the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount, go back and read that. There's a lot of good stuff there. But today we're actually going to be referencing some things in Matthew chapter 14. There's a lot in Matthew chapter 14, but we're going to start. I'm going to review the whole chapter, but we're actually going to start reading in verse 22, where Jesus walks on the waters, the troubled waters. And that's kind of the idea that I want to get through here with our remembrances of September 11th, 2001. The way we felt. I want you to all remember back when that happened, and how you felt, and spiritually how the Lord spoke with you during that moment. There's few times in American or anybody's history that you can ask somebody, where were you when XYZ happened, and they can tell you exactly what happened. And September 11th, I feel, for most of us that are of age that remember when that happened, or that were alive back when that happened, they could tell you. And I'll tell you this. I'll share this with you before we get started with the scripture. I was in college. It was my freshman year of college, my first few weeks of college. Really, we had just started my freshman year. I actually remember that morning. I was still living at home, and I got in the car to leave for my first class, which started at 9:30. So I probably was leaving about 8:30 in the morning. So in the trip between my house and the first class, which was actually at Brenau University, I was taking some classes that met there at Brenau, although I was a Gainesville College student. I was driving and listening to, some of you guys remember Fox 97, and it was really strange because Fox 97 was an oldie station. They played, old rock and roll songs, things like that. I remember that was their last, September 11th, 2001 was their last day in the studio. They had announced that they were moving the next day to a brand new studio. So on the way there, I was listening to the music, and occasionally the signal would just drop out. Occasionally in that drive to school, the signal would drop out, and the song was just a hiss. It was just static. And then the song would come back, and I, was keep driving toward Bernal, and again the signal would go out, and I thought that was very strange. And I figured, well, they're moving, they're moving equipment around, they're trying to get things unplugged there so they could go to their new facility. And I didn't think anything about it until afterwards. But that was around the time in that trip from my house to Bernal was when the planes were hitting the towers. Like I said, my first class started at 9:30, so both towers had been hit at that point. I don't know, can't recall about the time that the Pentagon was hit, but we went to class, and this was the days before the smartphones and all that stuff, so nobody knew what was going on while we were in that class. The class was from 9:30. It was a 90-minute class. So it was 9:30 to 11. We had a guest speaker that morning, and we were listening to the guest speaker. And then when we left class, it was 11 o'clock. And most all of the tragic things had happened by 11 o'clock that morning. I remember walking out, and someone had met us as we were walking toward our next class, which was across the way above the tea room at Bernal. And someone had said a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center, and I wasn't thinking anything along these lines. I was thinking, some guy that didn't know how to fly a Cessna had, gotten out of control and banged into the side, and tragic for that person. But oh well, those towers are strong, they're resilient. That there's maybe a little fire or something, it'll be out, and that'll be it. So I went on to class, and I got up to the next class, and we had about 15 minutes before that class started. I was sitting there, and I realized no one else was coming up to the class. And I thought that was strange because class only started in 5 more minutes or so. So I went downstairs to the tea room, which was a little restaurant, tea, coffee shop that they had there at Bernal. And they had a big screen TV down there. And that was when I went downstairs that I realized the brevity of the gravity of what had occurred. And everybody was gathered around that big screen TV they had down at the tea room at Bernal, and we realized what had happened. They were playing the repeats of the plane hitting the towers. By that time, both towers had fallen, and I was able to kind of rewind and see what had happened that morning. And it was you all know how you felt during that moment and what happened on September 11th, 2001, if you were alive and if you were able to experience that. You knew the hopelessness and just the sheer feeling of what is this? What is going on? And we are under attack. I remember walking outside, and they had the president had canceled all airspace. There's no airplanes that were allowed to fly, and to walk outside and look up, and you don't really realize it when in normal things, but you looked up and you saw no planes in the sky. And usually in Gainesville, you hear some little buzzing from the local airport. Didn't hear anything, and it was just a strange feeling. Long story short. Later that day, like I said, there was no communication like we had today. There were no smartphones. There was no way to send a text message or a message out to people. So throughout the day, I would continue going to my next classes and get to the door to realize there was a note on the door saying class is canceled. I went to the next class is canceled. So I realized, there was not much for me to do there that day. I did have an audition for a show that night, so I knew I had to stay in Gainesville. It wasn't something I could just drive home for, and I didn't feel that was necessary. But I did drive out to our arbor. I drove from Gainesville out to Yellow Creek that day, and I prayed in the arbor, and I stayed there for some amount of time. I'm not sure, but I was there by myself. I was able to be alone in the sawdust there at the arbor, and I did pray for our nation. I prayed for those that lost loved ones that day, because even though I didn't know the gravity of the situation at the time, I didn't know that the world was about to change as much as it did. I mean, I had a premonition that it would, but I gave it over to Jesus. I said, God, you have a reason for all these things. We don't know why things happen the way they do, but I give it over to you. Later that evening, although I had other things I had to do, I had to be at Gainesville College that night. Later on that evening, without any planning, without any organization, some of you might remember this, people began showing up here at the church, at the old church there. And they ended up having a service. And if I'm not mistaken, from what I remember them saying, 3 souls were saved that night at that service. I can't tell you the names of the people. I'm sorry, my camera seems to have frozen here. Give me a second, see if I can fix that. Try to jog its memory here. There we go. I think I'm back. 3 souls were saved that night. And it got me to thinking that sometimes we don't understand why tragic things happen. I don't understand why God, and this is a common philosophical thought about God, why God lets bad things happen to good people. But we must trust that God has His way and understands. Now, for those 3 people that were saved here, and countless others that may have been saved around this country in the wake of the September 11th attacks, God has His way of dealing with us, condemning us, and getting our attention through tragedy. Now, the people that lost their lives, whether they knew Christ or not, that was up. I mean, that had been their choice through life. And I don't know. Every single one of them that died that day may have been saved. Every single one of them that died that day may not have been saved. We don't know. And that's up to the Lord. The Lord speaks directly to the people. Faith is not something you can fake. Either you believe in God, you believe in Jesus Christ, or you don't. But God deals with all of us individually. And I believe that even I don't know, looking at you or looking at someone walking down the street, whether they're saved or not. I have a feeling when I approach someone or I meet someone that is saved, I have a feeling that they share a common faith with me. But definitely only God knows if you're truly saved or not. So that's why it's so important for you, if you don't know the free pardon of sin in Jesus Christ, to pray and acquaint yourself and accept that Jesus is the one true way. Having said that, I want to go to Matthew chapter 14. Now, just for the sake of time, because I have a few things I want to get to today before we run out of time, I'm going to summarize Matthew chapter 14. There's a lot going on in that chapter. It begins with the death of John the Baptist. John the Baptist had condemned Herod for basically, I'm just going to be blunt with you here, for sleeping with his brother's wife. Said that's not right. Put it out there and said, I don't think that's right. I think you shouldn't be sinning like that. And Herod didn't like that, so he put him in jail. Then for Herod's birthday, this is so backwards. No wonder things happen the way they did. But Herod's brother's wife's daughter, so his sister-in-law's daughter, which is his niece, was dancing for him, And in verse 6 it says, dance before them pleased Herod. I don't even want to think about what all that was, but asked what she wanted and swore he would give her whatever she wanted. And she said she wanted John the Baptist's head in a basket. And he regretted, sorry, I'm logged out of this thing. He'd regretted making the agreement that he would give what she wanted. So, a little distracted here. But he went through with it because he swore that he would give her what she wanted and gave John the Baptist's head in a basket. So it was through that Jesus went out into the desert to mourn his cousin. This was Jesus' cousin that he had lost. So this is when we get into the parable of the loaves and the fishes. He'd gone out when he'd heard of it in verse 13 of chapter 14 of Matthew. And then hordes of people there followed him out of foot onto the cities. They were mourning with him and went to grieve with him, basically. All right, so not to gloss over this, that's when the loaves and the fishes miracle happened. And then straight after that, this is what I wanted to get into, and this is kind of what I wanted to parallel with remembrance of the September 11th attacks. In verse 22, we're going to go ahead and get the Bible verse on here. We're going to read through this. I'll stop occasionally as we get to a point. But in verse 22, it says, and straightway, Jesus, and that means right away after he was done with feeding the masses, Jesus constrained his disciples. He basically had to force them. He said, listen, let's do this. You do this, and I'll do this. He says he constrained his disciples to get into a ship and go before him unto the other side while he sent the multitudes away. So he's going to take care of dismissing the masses, but he told his disciples, get into the ship, go. Let me take care of this on my own. And when he had sent the multitudes away, come on now, there it is. And he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into the mountain apart to pray. And that reminded me of the time on September 11th. I had to get away from all the stuff that was going on in the city. And I came here to the church to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship, going back to the disciples here, but the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, and for the wind was contrary. So there was a tragedy. There was a tragedy was going on. The disciples were in the ship, and as you'll see in a second, they were scared because something tragic was happening. They were in a ship. The ship was tossing leeward and to the stern, and they were taking on water, I'm sure. The storm was bad. The storm was bad. Verse 25, if it will agree with me here. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. The fourth watch of the night is approximately, but I looked this up, it was between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. The fourth watch means right before morning, just before the dawn, and that's symbolic in its own way. Verse 26, and when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a spirit, and they cried out for fear. They were scared. Verse 27, but straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. Those were Jesus' words. My thing doesn't do the red letters, but be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. Those are Jesus' words. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto the water, unto thee on the water. So Peter had the faith to ask, Lord, is it you? And in verse 29, and he said, come. There it is. Come. The word come is in red. This is Jesus saying come. He bids Peter to come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. So in the midst of this tragedy, I'm going to pause right there for a second. in the midst of this tragedy of being in this storm and being in the middle of the rough seas, he asks Jesus, "Bid me to come," and Jesus says, "Come." We're all, in a sense, in some sort of storm in our lives, especially before we're saved. We're in a storm. We're in a tragedy. We're in the middle of the tragedy. I just read a book that my wife had brought home from a thrift store or something about September 11th. It's a fiction. It was a fictional story, but it's actually based on a child that had gotten out of the building. And it just kind of rang true to me that when you're in a situation like that, like that was described in that book, that you would want to call out to Jesus and tell him to save you, to bring you out, deliver you out of this situation. And Peter, when he was on the ship, he had asked Jesus, "If it's you, beg me to come to you. Bid me to come." What it doesn't say, and what you forget about in that point, in verse 28, when he says, "Bid me to come out of the water," and Jesus says, "Come," and Peter walked out onto the water to meet him, the storm was still brewing. The storm was still going. The ship was still rocking. But Peter was able to walk on that water, even in the midst of all this that's going on, in the midst of all of the tragedy and all of the storm and the gales and the wind and the water and the ship taking on. I wonder what the other disciples were thinking when they saw. I bet you they were transfixed at this when Peter stepped onto that water and began to walk across the stormy, the sea that was rough and undulating. But he stepped out because he had faith, and he had Jesus in his sights. He knew it was Jesus, and he saw Jesus, and he knew it was him. And he wanted to get to Jesus. And like all of us that are unsaved, in that storm of our own salvation, Jesus bids you to come. And if you step out onto the water, even though it's still rocky and it's still rough, you can come to Jesus. We have a painting. When after Ruth was saved and she joined the church, I bought a painting at one of the last Christian bookstores that was over there near Best Buy. I found this painting and it just kind of spoke to me, and it's a picture of this. It's Jesus walking on the water with the ship off in the distance in the background of the picture. He's walking head bowed with like a moon creating a halo around his head. And I know that the artist made the waves of the waters rough and rough and wavy, but he's walking on a thin, even layer at the place he's walking. But there's waves all around him. That kind of represents that. Let's finish this up in verse 30 of Matthew chapter 14. It says, "But when he saw the wind boisterous," see, it was still choppy, "he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, 'Lord, save me.'" So he forgot about the Lord. He took his eyes away from the Lord, and he began to sink. He said, "Lord, save me." And immediately, this is verse 31. Let me get it up here. Immediately. I don't have to define that word for you. You understand what immediately means. He said, "Lord, save me." Earnestly. He meant it earnestly. He said, "Lord, save me." And immediately, Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said unto him, red letters, I'm sorry, that's a misnomer there. "O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt?" And when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. So immediately, when they had come, he'd gotten him into the ship, and I bet you the sea had calmed in a split second. The clouds probably parted, and it was calm. When you give yourself over to Jesus, that storm that you had upon your salvation, before your salvation, is calm. And even though the storm of life will still rage, you feel like you're on that water. Later on in life, after you've been saved, you feel that you're still on that water, staring at Jesus, as long as you got him in your sights, and you forget. I bet you the disciples on the boat forgot about the storm at that moment, and they watched Peter walk across the water. And I bet you as soon as he got nervous, the other disciples realized it was storming as well. But when Jesus got on the boat with them, the storm was over. So that kind of is what reminds me of this, of the tragedy of September 11th. Those that got out of it, it was probably, God became a lot clearer to them. So we don't know why tragedies like things like this happen, but in the aftermath of those tragedies, in the aftermath of the storm, when things are calm, it is clearer to find Jesus. And here at Yellow Creek, I believe that that happened. Those 3 souls that were saved the evening of September 11th in an impromptu, unorganized church meeting, I believe that Jesus worked mysteriously. His ways are mysterious to us, but he worked through this tragedy to save those 3 souls. And salvation, to be saved from the pits of hell, obviously that is worth it. This tragedy that had happened, as bad as it was, and as much as I feel bad for the people that had lost their lives, if it takes something as bad and as tragic as this to open someone's eyes and to follow Jesus, in my opinion, it's the will of God, and it's worth it. To have someone miss hell is worth blowing up the world, basically. If someone is able to miss hell, it's worth it. I'm not going to get into the reasons why this happened or whatnot. We can debate that at another time. I have my opinions on that. We have sinned as a nation, and there are different things that we could do better in our worldly relations. I'm not going to get into that, but I did want to mention one more thing before I run out of time here, and I thought this was very, very interesting. I gotten into reading some stuff, different books, of course the Bible, but I've been going to the library lately, reusing my library card. I like science fiction. That's one of the things I read. But one of the books that I got is this one right here. And it is almost 90 years old, this book right here. It's a book that was written by a local journalist here named William Bryce. And it's a book that you probably know if you're local, called A City Laid Waste. This is a book about the tornado that tore through downtown Gainesville in 1936, April 6th, 1936. Great book that you can check it out at the library in Gainesville, and there's different copies in different places if you're interested in reading about local history. And as I was reading this last night, the Lord showed me that I need to share a couple anecdotes that are in this book that relate to this message about finding Jesus through tragedy. And I wanted to share a couple with you. I'm just going to read it exactly out of the book. About these personal, there's this section in the book about personal experiences in the storm. This journalist had talked to people that had experienced the tornado that had gone through Gainesville in April of 1936. By the way, they're about to celebrate next year the 90th anniversary of this tornado. But this is from someone named Arthur Smith. I'm going to read this. I'm going to read a second example, and then I think our time will be expired, and that'll be the end of the class. But again, I want to encourage you, I'm watching. If you have any comments or questions or anything, I'm watching for the chat if it's coming in correctly. But let me just start here. It says, Arthur Smith, retired Gainesville businessman and formerly associated with his father R. Smith in the crockery and hardware business here, said that on the morning of the storm, his trusty old Chrysler, which he had been driving for 10 years, refused to crank for the first time. He had started to Pruitt Barrett Hardware Company to buy some farm equipment. Now he runs a large farm. And it was very much provoked as he watched the clouds gathering. In about the length of time it would have taken him to be in Pruitt Barrett's store, the storm struck, demolishing that establishment, and initiated the fire which completely destroyed it. After Mr. Smith realized where he would have been had his car cranked as usual, he was telling a friend on the street his experience. He patted the car on the hood and said lovingly, "I wouldn't take $1 million for her." After the storm, Mr. Smith's car cranked in its usual trusty manner. So that I've talked before about trusting that things happen, that the Lord will guide you certain places for a reason. It was not Mr. Smith's time to die that April morning as he was getting in his car to go to the hardware store to get some things for his farm. The car that he had known to crank and had been trustworthy for years and years decided that morning that it was not going to start. And that was the time that it would have taken him to get to the hardware store when the tornado had hit. So had that car cranked normally that morning, he would have been in the hardware store, which was struck and caught fire and was destroyed the morning of the tornado. So that is something that shows you the power of Jesus if we listen to his cues and listen to not think that things are such inconvenience to us, but when things like that happen, trust, Lord, this thing's happened for a reason. I trust you. I completely trust you. All right, so the other thing that I want to mention, this is amazing, okay? This is an experience related by Paul Smith, same name, same surname. It says, a remarkable experience is related by Paul Smith, who is my nephew, the author's nephew, who operates a dry cleaning establishment here. He was preparing to leave home when his small daughters, Patsy and Jean, called his attention to the clouds. He soon realized their import, and taking the little ones, kneeled beside a bed in prayer, while the storm raged and passed. Now I'm pausing right here. The storm actually came through exactly where his house was. The daughters had pointed out the storm clouds to him, and he, instead of running, kneeled down with his daughters to pray right where they were by the bedside. Okay, coming back to the story. Then he arose, told them it was over, and looked about. Every part of the home, except the room they had been, was gone, swept clean to the floors. There were double windows in the room which was left. Of the 16 panes, only one was blown out directly over a machine. Upon this machine lay a Bible. The wind had blown it open. Paul stepped to it and noticed it was open at the 27th chapter of Acts, which was headed, Paul sent to Rome is shipwrecked. The top verse of the page, the 14th, read, in fact, I'm going to pull it up here so you guys can read it with me. Acts, wasn't planning on doing this. Chapter 27, verse 14. We're going to read it together. Acts 27, verse 14 says, but not long after there arose against it a tempestuous wind, called he has it pronounced out here, Euroclydon. He said, reading on to the 22nd, he found assurance which had been given him even as he knelt. And he, in the book, cut out the last part of this, but I'm going to read the whole verse. In the 22nd verse, it says, and this is what the Bible was open to after the storm. His house had been blown away. Him and his daughters were safe by the bedside, and a Bible was open on top of this machine. And it says, and now I exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. So the Lord works, you've heard it before, the Lord works in mysterious ways, but he works in definite ways to speak to us if we'll listen. He has definite ways of speaking to us. The Bible verse that laid out on the Bible that had been blown open by the tornado was on Acts chapter 27. It said, but not long after there arose against it a tempestuous wind called a Euroclydon. And then he read on to verse 22. And now I exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, except that of the ship, except that of their home that they were sitting in, which was gone. They were okay. The Lord protected them. And I honestly believe that the Lord will protect you through whatever storm may be brewing in your life, whether it's a personal tragedy, loss of material goods, or if you're struggling with salvation, if you're coming upon this message and you're struggling with salvation, that storm that's going on inside of you, the Lord will take care of that too. That's a good stopping point. I want to thank you for indulging me as we remember September 11th, and then inadvertently we remembered the tragedy of the Gainesville tornado of 1936. And of course, we had personal relations with the one in 1998 as well. But when God blows a storm through your life, as tragic as it may seem, He still loves you, and there's something to be gleaned out of it, whether it be salvation, being closer to God, understanding and recognizing that He is God. Sometimes we lose track of that. The storms happen for a reason, and these tragedies that we live through can have the glory of God on the other side of it. And I'll leave it at that, but we'll dismiss in prayer here, and then get up for our morning service here. But look, most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak as clearly as I know how, Lord, and keep my stammering tongue straight and narrow to guide the class through what would be your will in the message, Lord. Be with the man who stands today, Lord, and may that any tragedy that may be brewing in someone's lives become apparent and become something that will be clear to them, Lord, that you are the way, the truth, and the life, that no man can come to the Father except through you. May that be clear to someone who might be struggling with salvation, those that might be struggling with difficulties in life, Lord, not understanding what is happening in the world and what we need to be doing, that we should be loving each other and not understanding the end goal, Lord. May they put all that aside and focus on you like Peter did in the water, that even though the waves may be choppy, that we can still look at you and not sink, Lord. And then if we do sway and look away, Lord, that we can cry out to you and you'll save us straightway, immediately, Lord. We trust that you have that ability and that you will save us. You'll save those that are lost. We have faith that you will, Lord. And be with those that have prayer requests, those that haven't been mentioned, and those that are mentioned in service today. We ask these things in your holy name. Amen. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Lord, for getting me through that. Sorry Andy wasn't here, and sorry Ruth wasn't able to be with us, but things happen for a reason, and the Lord knows. So we will see you next time, and hopefully we'll be back on Hebrews chapter 12 next week, but we'll follow the Lord.